Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 191. I'm excited to get back in action here. We've taken a little podcast hiatus just to regroup and stockpile some content. And we're starting off with an absolutely awesome guest. This is a guy I've known in the private sector, even though he spent a ton of time in professional baseball. He's local to our facilities, both in Massachusetts and Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. A little bit of a snowbird like I am, but just a guy who has a wonderful perspective on baseball. Super giving of his time and his expertise, and we've had some amazing conversations over the years. And honestly, it wasn't until I prepared for this podcast that I really looked at how long his baseball resume has been built, how impressive it is. Just a guy who's seen baseball from obviously the pitching coach side of things as a player, but he's also seen it from a front office standpoint, and his time has gone on as a consultant. He's been in a lot of different organizations, so he's seen a lot of different ways that people do things and just yielded an amazing perspective. One of those guys that can talk to some of the absolute legends in the game with a single phone call. People dating all the way back to, Sandy Koufax, all the way up to Pedro Martinez and some of the greatest pitchers of today. So a guy who's seen pitching development over decades and decades, and just amazing resource. So you're going to like this. I definitely enjoyed it a lot. Enjoy. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. One scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition happen on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it. Today's guest has an extensive resume across baseball as a player, pitching coach, front office executive, and consultant over more than 50 years in the game. After a standout career at the University of New Haven as a pitcher, he signed with the Philadelphia Phillies as a free agent. As a major leaguer, he made 13 appearances for the Phillies and Blue Jays in the early and mid-70s, and then retired after the 1979 season to embark on a coaching career that began as a minor league pitching coach in 1981 with the Dodgers organization. He later ascended to the minor league pitching coordinator role from 1987 through 1994, and in 1995, he became the Dodgers' major league pitching coach. During his time with the Dodgers, he played a role in the development of Pedro Martinez, Orel Hershiser, Ramon Martinez, Hideo Nomo, Chan-Ho Park, Pedro Estacio, and Darren Dreifort. He moved on to become the pitching coach for the New York Mets for the 1999 and 2000 seasons, including a trip to the World Series in 2000. After the World Series, he resigned to return to the Dodgers as a senior vice president of baseball operations. He served one half season as the interim general manager of the Dodgers in 2001 as well. He left the Dodgers front office to become the pitching coach for the Red Sox from 2003 to 2006, including their 2004 World Series championship. He then served as the Major League pitching coach for the Astros in 2007 and then moved on to the Seattle Mariners to become a special assistant to the general manager. Subsequently, he was named their minor league pitching coordinator. After 2009, he moved to the Atlanta Braves with the same position and briefly served as their Major League pitching coach in 2011. In the fall of 2013, he was named the Baltimore Orioles pitching coach, a role he held for 3 years before rejoining the Braves as a pitching consultant. Most recently, he served as the pitching coach for the U.S. Olympic baseball team that won the silver medal in the 2021 Olympics. Please welcome to the show, Dave Wallace. Wally, thank you so much for taking some time with us. We have probably more conversations in person, just hanging out at the facility that I wish I had recorded for podcasting purposes, but I'm excited to actually get one on the record.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. You're right. I mean, going back to your days up in the Northeast in Boston and then reconnecting in Jupiter the last couple of years, it's really been an eye opener for me. So I appreciate it.
It's fun, man. We're spoiled to have so much knowledge right down the street, hanging out with us in the wintertime. And, it's funny. People don't probably realize that. I think one of our initial points of commonality was our eye doctor. Dr. Anna Cressey was a great provider to both of us. And then J.R. Graham, I know, spent some time hanging at your place up in Massachusetts while he trained with us for an off season. So you're always going above and beyond for guys, not just coaching them, but giving them a place to stay during the winter. So always respect how much you paid it forward to the community. But maybe the best place to start is, so as I was preparing for this, I always know you as, Dave Wallace, super passionate baseball guy who loves hanging out with guys of all eras. I mean, you can talk to Sandy Koufax and you can talk to an 18-year-old in the same week, and you can resonate with both of them. So I went and I looked at your baseball resume, and it is without a doubt one of the most impressive ones in Major League history. I mean, you were a big leaguer yourself after a really, really successful college career, but then it was minor league coaching. It was major league pitching coach. It was senior vice president of baseball operations. You were an interim general manager. You became a special assistant to the GM. You were a minor league pitching coordinator again, major league pitching coach again. And then, on the tail end, you did pitching consulting for a couple different organizations, and you were the Team USA pitching coach. So you have literally seen every angle of baseball, and that's why I'm so excited to kind of chat with you in this context and share your knowledge with a larger audience. So maybe speak, way back to the path to coaching. I think we all realize those who can do and those who can't coach. What was your path to coaching when the
well,
playing?
I guess I couldn't do it well enough.
Hey, you did it pretty darn good. There aren't a lot of guys that pitched in the show.
No, I think, Eric, what happened is when I was done playing, probably 79, 80 in that time, there was only one pitching coordinator in every organization. Mm-hmm. And I was always curious to, why don't organizations hire pitching coaches? Not necessarily at every level, but at least more than one, because if you weren't a top prospect, no offense to anybody, but you really didn't get the attention you needed. And there wasn't a lot of instruction, a lot of experience around. And one guy had to travel. At that time, there was 6 or 7 minor league teams. So as fate would have it, in the winter of 80, going into the 81 season, I was talking to the scout who signed me, and he worked for the Dodgers at the time. And he said, "Hey, would you be interested in being a pitching coach in A-ball for the Dodgers minor league team in Vero Beach?" And lo and behold, they were the first organization, I think, to start hiring pitching coaches at each individual level. And when that happened, I interviewed for the job, and Bill Schweppe, who was a farm director at the time, and I think Al Campanis was the general manager, and I had played so much winter ball that I had kind of a broken Spanish that I learned. So they really hired me because I could speak a little Spanish, not anything I knew about pitching. So that's how it kind of started.
Hey, it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it really did. And once you start interacting with the players, as you well know, it hasn't stopped, Yeah. And so I really had taken to it very, very well, and, just kept going and plugging away and catching a couple breaks along the way. And it's worked out well. I never did. I think I'd spend probably 52 years in professional baseball. So great experience and a lot to share.
I'm curious, what is it about maybe your approach to coaching, or even just your, I guess, your interactions with players that make your expertise so generational? And the reason I say that is, I mentioned your name to Zach Britton, and he raves about you, like from your time in Baltimore together. I mentioned your name to Kurt Schilling, he raves about you from your time in Boston. Like really everywhere you've gone, the Mike Sorokas and the guys that came up in that Brave system when you were there, on the tail end, or even, Scott McGuff with Team USA, like really everywhere you've gone, you've created not just raving fans and people who have benefited from being around you, but they're people that really like, they look to you as a lifelong friend. They stay in touch. Like, I can't tell you like that Orioles crew, Darren O'Day, Chris Tillman, Brad Brock, obviously Britton, so many of those guys, like they really, I think you were with them 3, maybe 4 years, and they've really latched onto you for a career and sought you out for advice long after, you all left Baltimore. So what do you think it was that made your relationships, your impact on them so generational?
Well, I think a couple of things. The Dodger organization at the time I joined it was very, very lucky. They had Red Adams, and nobody on this podcast will recognize that name, but he was Walt Alston's pitching coach. And Walt was Red was an advisor, and he was the guy that he would have sessions with all the young pitching coaches and explain to us how important it was. And his saying was, hey, they don't trust you until, or they don't trust you until you really get to know them as a person as opposed to a player. So even though you might want to say something, you're better off just studying personalities, knowing the individuals. So as he called it, when you shoot the gun, it's loaded. You know what you're talking about. You've learned the person. As you know, Eric, there are so many different personalities, so many different cultures. And, you get the high school player from Louisiana or Wisconsin, and then you get the college kids from Stanford or, Florida State or UCLA or LSU who is so advanced. And so I learned real early on that you have to take an individual approach and get to know the guys more than anything else. And once they felt like you knew them and you really cared about them and you asked them questions, and I was just blessed to have those mentors, even Sandy. I don't know how it started, but in the early 80s, he was always around and we just hit it off for some reason. And he was such a resource. And, Johnny Padres, those guys just, and the catchers, you had Campanella at the time, God bless him. You had Johnny Roseborough. And to see those people speak and look and listen and learn, I think that's how it started. I'll never forget, I was nervous before the first actual Class A game, and I think it was 1981. And I asked Red, I said, Red, what do I do? I mean, is there a PT thing? What's going on here? He goes, you know what, Dave, I have been around you long enough to know that you have an instinct for this. So trust your instincts and follow them. And when you make a mistake, don't, which you're going to, and you're going to make a lot of them, then learn from it, move on. But just really trust your instincts and your interaction with the players and get to know them as people, before you get to know them as a young player.
Absolutely. Do you feel like you use the comment of like load the gun before you shoot? Like we're talking about the 80s, the 90s, and the turn of the century, we started getting more data, probably not 2000 to 2010, but certainly, probably over the last 10 to 15 years. I think the average player entering professional baseball, for better or worse, has been exposed to far more information, right? Nobody really walks in truly naive anymore. Do you think that's made it harder or easier? Because you've obviously seen both generations. Like, is it tougher now that, a kid walks into professional baseball and he's already been throwing on TrackMan and Edgertronic for 5 or 10 years at this point?
Well, I compare it to this, and I've talked to a couple of veterans about this who are still pitching, by the way. And, and those guys have been around a long time for a reason. And the conversation was like, hey, these analytics and all this new information has really, really helped me
Hmm.
continue my career, get into my mid 30s, late
Yeah.
30s, and even in some cases, maybe 40. And I'm still pitching at a high level because of this.
Hmm.
And my reaction to that was, that's terrific. I'm glad you embraced it. We all should.
Hmm.
However, you came up in like the late 90s, early 2000s when you had to learn how to pitch.
Yeah.
So you did that, you did it successfully, and now you integrated all the information and you continue your career.
Yeah.
So it's a hard question to answer because
Yeah.
I think in some senses these kids do have more information.
Yeah.
They know and they know the spin of the ball, the rate, the vertical movement, the horizontal movement. They know all the information, but I'm not sure they know how to pitch as much.
Yeah.
So, somebody asked me the other day, is pitching an art or a science? Well, it's both. It is a lot of science now, and there is so much wonderful information. However, the good ones, when you watch the games in October
Yeah.
and you see the really top tier guys, they're still pitching. They elevate, they do things, they go down and away if they have to. It's not necessarily the go to anymore, but to do that and they elevate, they go inside. A lot of the guys, the veteran guys now talking to them, their change of speed is their fastball because it's less usage now.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. And here we are getting crazy with conversations already. But yeah, so I look at it that way. I think, even though the kids are bigger, stronger, there's more information, they have better nutrition, they have sleep. There's such an advantage now
Mhm.
to young guys coming up that, but there's also some cons.
Yeah.
I mean, as you and I spoke often, I see 14, 15, 16-year-old kids having surgeries because, maybe they're training wrong. Maybe they're doing too much at a young age. And, there's just, it's a tough road to navigate because, and how many times have you and I seen bullpens where guys throw, they look back at the numbers
Yeah.
and they go, hey, wow, that was unbelievable. That was like 2,800 RPMs.
Yeah.
However, the ball's like 3 feet in front of the plate and it's not a strike. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things. So again, I think it's great to have the information. I think it's very useful. I love it. I'm still learning it, but I think it has to be given at the right time
Yeah.
to the right people. And, you know, the, they're, it's almost tough for a young kid because all he hears watching TV is velocity.
Yeah.
And it's true.
Yeah.
We are looking for velocity. However, I think it was Justin, and he just recently they asked him about
Oh
the
yeah. That was an
injuries and
outstanding
all
one.
that.
Mhm.
And, he made a good point when he said, why can't we just trust what our natural ability until we see how far it takes us? And then maybe if we have to do something, there are ways to do it
Yeah.
because physically we're mature. We
Mhm.
know how to handle it. We go to expert people such as yourself and do it the right way.
Mhm.
So I think again, we could have a whole podcast on
Well,
that one subject, but
I
that's
think it's,
just
yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's one of those things I use the analogy. It's like giving somebody calculus before they've done algebra. We're selling out for really aggressive throwing programs and things like that. And there's research that shows like your velo can go up from doing a medicine ball program. I mean,
right.
these are studies that I think were done in the late 90s. A basic strength and conditioning program, gain weight, and I think, what's the most eye-opening for me now is actually looking at players who are decent high school prospects that didn't get drafted, kind of your 6'3", 175 pound, 88 to 90 right-handed pitcher whose arms and legs flying everywhere. He's like really early arm speed. He's running away from his arm. And then you see him 3 years later at a Power Five school, and all of a sudden, they're 92, 94, and the delivery
Right.
is better. And when I look at those guys, I can't help but think how much damage did they do at ages 17 to 19, to steal a Derek Johnson quote, when their arms were writing checks, their butt couldn't cash. And I think
Right.
so back to it is like, how much different could this all be if we would just take a logical linear progression of preparing an entire body, against the background of a well-structured competitive year, in the 15th to 18th range. And that's why
Right.
I would love to see MLB get more involved on the youth side with driving some of those initiatives, because we both know there's no such thing as a normal elbow in the draft anymore. It's a totally
No.
different time.
Right. It's interesting because I'm going to participate in again this year with some stuff in USA Baseball, and I'm as I can be, I'm going to be a pain in the rear end to some people because I'm going to ask those questions about,
Yeah.
they have this Pitch Smart app,
Yep.
and I really want to delve into it. So I'm hoping I can connect with some of the orthopedic doctors and the trainers and the S&C guys and just see where it goes, because I agree with you. I think, there's so many layers to what we're talking about that, but I think it goes back to these kids. And I see it in my own family, my
Yeah.
grandson. I see what's happening, and they just this last weekend, 6 games in 3 days.
Yep.
I understand it, it's fun, but what's interesting, Eric, my experience in Japan and knowing some of the players, they practice as young kids much more than they play.
It's insane.
Same as European basketball
Yeah.
players.
There was one study that looked at Japanese 9 to 12-year-olds, and the average practice time per week in that study was 18 hours. In a 9 to 12-year-old, and structurally their elbows are actually much worse than American elbows. Like the standard deviation on it was pretty massive too. So you had kids that were practicing like 25 hours a week at that age. It's just you hear about the 700 pitch marathon bullpens, and they're sometimes doing it at age 11.
Well, just I had an experience with Hideo Nomo. Everybody talks about all these Japanese guys coming over now, and his first few years here, I mean, I have a printout. He threw, and he pitched 12 years because of his work ethic and his, what he did. But he averaged, and I can get the data. I have the data, but I can get the proof because I have it in my drawer here. He averaged 180 pitches a game for 5 years in a row.
It's incredible.
I mean, and as you said, how many bullpens?
Yeah.
Or how, and
God,
when he
God,
came over
God bless
here,
his bullpen catchers.
I know it. And he's, so that was unique, but he practiced, and, so it's funny. We used to hear about the Dodger way, the Yankee way, the Red Sox way. There's no way. I mean, I see it in your place. Young kids are so physically different. You get that 6'4" lean guy, and then you get the 5'11" stocky, strong guy. And so I think it's got to become an individual development program. What is the individual anatomy, the physiological makeup of these people? And that's your expertise. And I think you have to integrate that with, the conditioning. And anyway, you get me going so you can regret it, because I can't stop.
I love it. Well, all right, so I'm going to open another can of worms. All right, so we're talking about 5 decades in the game, plus your own playing experience, right? Pitching has changed a ton since your first coaching opportunity. But what are the non-negotiables? What are the things that are consistent across every era, regardless of how usage has changed and how hard guys are throwing, all that? Like, when you look at the guys that are really thriving as pitchers in any era, what are they doing well?
Well, I think they repeat their delivery. You learn that early on. And I think, the biomechanics of throwing a baseball properly it sounds like it's easy to figure out, but going back to Dr. Andrews and Dr. Job and being in the labs and doing the studies and seeing the thesis that my buddy Sandy wrote in the 70s, equaling it to almost a javelin thrower when you use your lower half of your body to get the top half going nice and easy. But you learn your delivery, your mechanics, and what you do during a game at the major league level. When you know that and you get out of whack, you can come right back within a couple of pitches. That's experience. And I think the other thing is command, not control. Even though it's changing now where we're throwing high fastballs, there's a big difference when you throw one high that you can swing at and miss, And if you throw it high and you miss high, there's another data. I think 60% of the home runs given up are mislocated high fastballs because it comes down in the middle of the zone. So even though that changes and it's not a corner per se, it's still a level that you missed. So that's commanding, And the other thing is whatever secondary pitches you have, you just have to be able to execute them. As you know, I mean, you've seen enough games. As soon as you get to the big leagues, everybody's throwing, on 97, 98, 99. But I can tell you three great, probably future Hall of Fame catchers that used to tell me, look, these guys come up and they throw this hard, but they don't understand. We see this 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So if they can't make a quality pitch with it, after a while, we're going to time it and get on it. So, you go in, you go out, you go up, you go down, the four quadrants of the strike zone, and whatever secondary pitch you can have, you have to be able to throw it for strike in a triple count. 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1. And, as you know, how many good pitchers now 3-1 throw that just dead pitch fastball, or they throw a little splitty, and hitters they play off their ego, they want to swing. And then that's the other thing. The hitters now, they're adjusting to what the pitchers are doing. So we can already see where the elevation of the fastball a few years ago, now maybe not so much, because the hitters have adapted and they're looking for that. So it's a constant battle. But the non-negotiables are, command, knowing your delivery, throwing a secondary pitch in a crucial situation, and really, how good are you when the stuff's going bad? I mean, watching those three guys in Atlanta from the other side of the field, Schmoltzy, Maddox, and Glavine. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, Eric, that they're losing 3-0 in the second inning. You know what? In the seventh inning, they're still in there, and they won 4-3.
Yeah.
So when you see young guys come up through the minor leagues who maybe have a little tough inning or two, and they bounce back and they don't give up and hang their head, the mental game is so crucial, and not enough time is spent on it, as far as pitching, because, pitching is a constant strive for perfection with the realization you will never achieve it. You just won't, and that's a tough concept to understand. And unless, and I tell young pitchers all the time, unless you've been on the mound, I don't care if you're a hitting guy, an outfield guy, an infield guy, you don't know what it's like to be out there and get your ass handed to you, I mean, or strike somebody out, or get a double play and walk off that field. There's a high you can't explain. It's crazy, man. I mean, it's just, so the non-negotiables, not to get away from your question, for me are those things.
Do you think it's and those are great answers. The comment about, like, you don't know what it's like to get it handed to you, in a tough spot like that. Do you think my next question was going to be about the average player entering pro ball. We kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier with how guys have changed, but do you think that players entering pro ball, their amateur experience has been almost too finely manicured? Too many like snowplow parents clearing the way for them. Too many go out and just blow up a radar gun in a 1-inning game and an All-American game. Those are kind of like scenarios I see. It's like they've been desensitized to struggling losing, right? If you lose this one, there's another national championship next weekend that you can go and play on. Like, I don't think guys really embrace, like, hey, I gave up a 5 spot in the first inning of a state championship game, and I have to sit around and think about this for the next 8 months. Do you see players that are in a different spot now than they were in the past? Like, has the competitive instinct of today's pitcher changed compared to what you saw years ago?
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. I really do. I mean, it's the culture now, and I mentioned this to you. I'm thinking about doing some stuff. I like to speak to the parents of those kids all over the country.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, it's just, everybody gets a trophy, all this kind of stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
And I understand that. But I've seen a couple examples just around here locally where, a young 11-year-old has a pretty good game, gets a couple hits, and he made a base running error, got tagged out or some crazy stuff. And man, I'm telling you, his dad undressed him after the game at 11,
Crazy.
So the answer to your question is, yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think it is. And that's
Yeah.
not some old school guy like me. That's
Yeah.
just, my grandchildren, same way.
Yeah.
They're glad we hold them accountable,
Yeah.
you
The
know?
pendulum goes too far, right? On some ends,
Right.
you eviscerate a kid for making an error. At the other end of the spectrum, you let kids
Right.
get away with murder, and it's a very it's a transactional AAU world where you can show up and
Boy,
just throw 3 innings and leave and go to the airport before the game even ends. It's a very different world now.
yeah, it really is. It needs to be navigated a whole bunch better, I believe.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where we had to
Yeah.
attack it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I love that your perspective comes from such a broad, kind of collection of experience. And one of the things that was interesting is you had success across multiple organizations, across multiple time periods, and you've seen guys that have not only gotten to pro ball but also made it to the big leagues. Like I think that developmental continuum is important, not just like FCL and low A managers slash pitching coaches. Those are really hard jobs. Kids
Right.
are in the U.S. for the first time. They may be learning the language. They may be away from home for the first time, but to see it, as a coordinator, as a big league coach, seeing guys through that path, I'm curious, what are the characteristics you see in guys that, that actually get to that next level, that go from the 18-year-old draft pick to the 23-year-old, major league starting pitcher, where those 5 years are really transformational for them.
Right. I think the physical talent is pretty easy to see.
Mhm.
I mean, all of us can go to a game and recognize, oh my God, I saw Acuna when he was playing. He was 17.
Mhm.
Okay. And I saw Pedro and Ricky balls, and that's the easy part. I think the difficult part, where we make a lot of mistakes, we all do, is what's inside that person.
Yeah.
Does he have a willingness to succeed? Is he going to back off because now where he was the best player in high school, the best player in college. Now everybody he plays against was the best player where they came from.
Yeah.
So now it starts an even field, so to speak, and um, I just think it takes those guys, and that goes back to learning people.
Yeah.
Get to know their parents, find out what you can about their background, ask them questions. I think if we ask young players questions more and stop dictating what we think they have to do, we will be surprised by how much they will reveal themselves to who we really are. And that gives us insight. I remember a veteran pitcher told me one time, he goes, "Hey, I don't want you to be my friend. I got enough friends. I want you to be a good coach." So, and it really resonated, made a lot
Yeah.
of sense. So what entails that? There's no book on it.
Mhm.
There's a knack to it, I think. And it's not just, being a pitching coach, knowing mechanics, knowing this, knowing that. It's you're their uncle away from home, you're their mentor, you're whatever you are, they are. And the biggest thing is you better be there when they have a rough day.
Yeah.
When they have a bad, everybody's on them when they're good. Hey,
Yeah.
I was the guy. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Mhm.
But I think the respect comes from when things aren't going so well. Let's talk about it. Give them a pat on the rear end. Talk the next day, but really let them recognize. And you see that in young kids. And I think to answer your question even further, it's just everybody's going to struggle. Everybody's going to go through a hard time at some point. Where is that? How
Mhm.
are they going to come out of it? And you can see that early on if you know what you're looking for. That's why even as a coordinator, I used to, excuse me, get in uniform and sit in the dugout and just do nothing but observe.
Yeah.
Observe the coaches, observe the players, observe what's going on. Look at a guy's face when he's walking off the mound.
Yeah.
Or when you have to go out to the mound, you look at his face. That stuff tells you so much. So, you know, those intangibles, the physical stuff takes care of itself. The intangibles, the competitiveness, the willingness to learn, um, and adjust and take information from, I always say, hey, take information from whoever you want, sort it out to see what makes sense to you.
Mhm.
I mean, I having the pleasure of working with guys like Seaver and Sandy and Palmer and Nolan and those guys, I would always say, come here, talk to this guy.
Mhm.
Look who he is, you know. And let's face it, some people on this won't recognize those names, but what happens is when a young man sees you as his coach, go to another resource, even if it was his college coach, because what do we want? We want the best for that player,
Mhm.
regardless of where it comes from.
Yep.
That's what has to happen. And you know, if Jim Palmer can teach you something, if Nolan can teach you something, if your high school coach, I've told many kids, call your coach.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Call your dad. Is your dad your mentor? I mean,
Mhm.
Mike Hampton, I had in New York for a year, and that son of a bee, it took me 6 months to get to know him.
Mhm.
But I finally got to where his dad was the guy.
Okay.
So every time we
Yeah.
incorporated that, it worked. So, you know, beyond the ability, beyond the competitiveness and all that stuff, that pitching's a different game. And your experience being around different guys tells you who the ones you are going to make it and who the ones really, Eric, or who's a bullpen guy.
Yeah.
You know, Zach Britton is the perfect case.
Mhm.
He started for 4 years in Baltimore, and you know, Dom Cheedy.
Mhm.
We got hired, and Buck sent us out to California to see him and Tillman and a couple of other guys. And you know, Zach, man, he's just yeah, but this and that. So that I'm telling you, it was on the campus of UC Irvine.
Mhm.
They played long toss. And second day there, we're walking back, and Dom says to me, he goes, he's a bullpen guy. You know, but we're laughing about it
Worked out
because
pretty darn well.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so those are some of the answers, not to get away.
We interrupt this podcast with a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by AG1. It's an NSF certified all-in-one superfood supplement that features 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs. I use this product daily myself, and a ton of our athletes do as well. Head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim my special offer of 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. AG1 gives you peace of mind that you're covering all your nutritional bases. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you'll get that special offer. No, I love the comment on like being there when they struggle. And when you said it, we had a pro boxer we trained, and he was like 27-0, and he took his first loss, and he came back into the facility 4 or 5 days later. His face is still kind of puffy. He's like, you know, they always the same. They always told me coming up, and I had never experienced. He said, when you win, everybody wins. When you lose alone. And he's
Right.
like, man, everybody was there for the after party after my wins, and they couldn't wait to get photos and all this stuff. And it was just crickets after I lost for the first time. So I love the idea of like making that the best opportunity to really help and contribute and, you know, help to
Right.
rebound. So
They
that's
remember it.
yeah, they for sure do. And I remember actually talking to Jacoby Brissett, quarterback who's back with the Patriots, and I asked him, you know, what made Belichick so good in your time there? He's like, when we lost, nobody was flustered. Everybody knew exactly why we lost and what the plan needed to be to get things back on track. He's like, in other places I played, it was different, right? There wasn't always like a clear path forward. So I think that, you know, when you can give athletes clarity in those moments when they're really struggling, it obviously nurtures the relationship to a great level.
Exactly right. Well, just when in 2003, when we lost Game 7 to the Yankees in the ALCS, and you know it was Aaron hit that home run off, God bless Tim Wakefield, and Tito and Mike Timlin and guys spoke in the clubhouse after that, and that was traumatic. I mean, not Tito, Grady, and that was traumatic. But the guys used it. They, you know, we used it as okay, let's go. And sure enough, the very next year, we're down 3 games to nothing. And here comes Tito, you know, expounding, and Mike Timlin was there again. Hey, we're down 3. But remember the feeling or whatever they said, I don't know, but it resonated. So you're 100% right. I mean, and it just, this game is so unpredictable and so crazy. Just be ready for what you don't think is going to happen, because it is.
You've already hinted at it, but you're a really curious guy, and that's one of many reasons we love having you around. Is like you always ask compelling questions that make me think about the why behind what we do, and you're after your time in pro baseball, you're still looking for ways to get better. And I think we're also in an era where there's still some of those like siloed approaches where people may stick to your own departments. Like you're hanging out and you're talking with us in strength and conditioning, you're talking with our analysts, you're talking with our physical therapist, and you really embrace this synergistic approach where all these different folks are integrated with skill development. I'm curious, what made you an early adopter in this regard? Because I know the early years in Baltimore, like they really, really embraced pushing guys in the weight room hard, and a lot of those guys really thrived with it. What was it that made you so intrigued, and how did you nurture that partnership among skill coaches,
Well,
with the
I
different orgs
mean,
you were in?
again,
Yeah,
it's experience,
yeah,
Eric, and what you learn over the years, um, both as a player and probably more so as coaching, is that it sometimes gets so territorial. And the trainer doesn't want the strength and conditioning guy around. The strength and conditioning guy doesn't want the physical therapist. And then there's the orthopedic guy, and then there's the pitching coach, and then there's the hitting coach, and then there's the manager. So I don't know how it happened, but the thought just came to me when I was the interim GM in LA. Jim Tracy was the manager, and I said, you know what? I think we're a couple of weeks into the season, and we just started. I went to Pat Screener, the physical therapist, Stan Johnson, the trainer, and I can't think of who the strength guy was. I know his name was Claude. I can't think of who it was, but what I did was I said, you know what, guys? What we're going to do every single home game in LA is we're going to have a meeting before we go out and stretch. And in that meeting was Dr. Joe, myself, Jim Tracy, the trainer, the physical therapist, the pitching coach, and the strength and conditioning guy. And we all just said, look, we are on this team. The reason we're here is these players. We don't care where it comes from. It's our responsibility to make these players better, however that happens. So let's put all this BS aside and let's get with it. I mean, so we started having a meeting every single day, and it was interesting, very, very interesting how that worked. And at the end of the year, Trey said, you know what, I'm so glad we did that because it kind of unified everybody. And if we had a disagreement, which we did, and they became heated, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, everybody knew everybody's situation. Everybody knew, hey, I only want him throwing 25 pitches today because he had a 115 pitch outing in 5 innings. It was really a struggle. Why? Well, I put him through this exercise. He's a little weak in this area. Okay. And, so that's what kind of intrigued me. And since then, I've been just very curious to incorporate everybody. I mean, Eric Schomburg down there you told me a long time ago, and you're right. You have, I mean, Tanner, those guys they're so talented, and we don't spend enough time with them. And not only them, but there are others in the industry who don't want a pitching coach around, so it's kind of that. So, I mean, but to answer your question, I just said, you know what are we doing? I mean, we're all here for the best interest of the player. What you're doing for different players and different organizations, it wasn't done 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're going to evolve. You and I talk, there's too many young guys who think they have all the answers, and there's too many old guys who think there's no other way, which is terrible. There's got to be a blend and open-mindedness to all of us to continue to try to help each other do what's right. I mean, especially now with what's going on in the pitching aspect. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So it started, well, God, that's 24 years ago now. But yeah, that was 2001 in LA. That's
But
when it all started.
it seems so logical as we talk about it right now. It was very unheard of back then to have that level of synergy across departments, and now you see that it's a very player-driven model that's rolled out across this high-performance culture across all sports now. But it wasn't always like that. There was a lot
Right.
more siloed. So you hinted at the today's pitching situation. Like let's tackle it. I mean, we've had some awesome discussions on it, so we might as well do it with a recorder on. But injuries are not good, really across any level. I mean, I think we hear a lot about the bigger names in the big leagues that have had arm issues this year, but in reality, it's just as bad in college. It's even worse
Yeah.
on the amateur side. So where's your head at with some of the big causative factors, and how we start to address them?
Well, I wish there was one way, but there's so many layers to this.
Yeah.
Going back to the young kids,
Mhm.
I think the overusage and the, bigger and stronger is better. Whereas the one word you never hear ever anywhere you go is recovery.
Mhm.
I mean, these kids playing in these travel teams and youth leagues, I mean, I know it's fun and I know it's great and I know the parents have a ball, but when does a kid recover?
Yeah.
You stop playing baseball in the summer in maybe August and you start playing soccer or football or whatever, or then you start basketball. I wish all kids would play all sports and back off until they're old enough to and develop their whole body
Yeah.
instead of just one as a baseball. But unfortunately today, parents see their kid in whatever sport they're involved in as, oh, he's going to go to the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, whatever it is. And, but I think it starts there. I think it goes into, you know, um, young kids just hearing about velocity and not training right, trying to just, I see kids in the gym I go to all the time, just, and if they have a baseball thing in their t-shirt, I send them the CSP app and say, why don't you guys do this? I mean, but it's amazing to this day how many people don't understand it and hear of it.
Yeah.
And, throwing, I mean, I can tell you from experience, I know a couple of organizations and I won't name them, but the kids today, talking about young minor league guys now after college or after high school or JUCO, wherever they come from, they throw one time a week, 5 innings, 75 pitches. And then there's one bullpen for 20 pitches in
Mhm.
a 7-day period. How the heck do you learn your delivery? How do you learn your mechanics? Number one. Number two, the other 5 days, and again, I was a pain in the rear end.
Yeah.
I go in and see the work they're doing.
Mhm.
And now it's science. And I show everybody, and you and I are on the same page, the kind of books we talked about. The science says this is fatigue
Yeah.
on your shoulder, on your elbow. You
Mhm.
don't have any time to recover. If you're 17, your joints and ligaments aren't ready to undertake the muscle you're putting on.
Yeah.
Therefore, we create injury, right? So there's more damage being done by all this stuff rather than throwing a baseball.
Yeah.
And now there's the sweeper, and now there's the biomechanics. Sandy and I talked about the biomechanics. It's a rotational delivery now,
Mhm.
which yes, it does increase velocity, but the downside is it's a precursor to injury.
Mhm.
You know,
Definitely more
however,
variables to how it can go wrong.
yeah. Well, the other thing, Eric, is why don't we identify the guys that can throw it?
Mhm.
I can name 5 guys I've had who their natural arm slot, yeah, they can throw a sweeper,
Yeah.
perfect. But if you're making a guy who's a little bit different with his delivery, he's going to create an injury. So there's variables in that. I mean, it's just so we don't train guys. I mean, 2 organizations I know of had one, I think one organization had one and one organization had none. Not one young minor league pitcher threw 100 innings.
Incredible.
So,
Yeah.
and you brought up Soroka, you can talk to him and Max Fried and Ian Anderson and those guys, Kevin Gosman in Baltimore, Double A, they throw 150, 160 innings. The right way, they
Mhm.
recover, you throw a pretty good bullpen, you back off, And it takes a team effort. It takes the trainer, it takes a strength guy, it takes a PT, it takes everybody.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me, how do you develop young pitchers that come to the big leagues and stay healthy? I said, you can't write it down.
Yeah.
Physically, you have to be there every day.
Yeah.
And you have to be every single day, talk to your relievers, talk to your starters, talk to everybody, get to know them. And that goes back to them trusting you, and they'll tell you. And as you know, you've seen, if and Buck used to say to Dom and I, hey, can he pitch today if I ask him? We say, yeah. Well, can he pitch if you ask him? We say no. And he said, no, he's not pitching.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
And, between rotational deliveries, no recovery, training to get too big, too strong the wrong way, biomechanics, injuries coming out of high school and junior college. And, how many guys come to you now? They're not even signed yet. They've had Tommy John.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, we've seen
Yeah.
14-year-olds. It's
Right.
scary. You hinted at, and I'm actually really curious. We've never even talked about this, is like, obviously building this innings count is a big deal, right? Giving guys the ability to, develop a chronic workload that they can handle. And there's a lot of different opinions on how you do it, right? You take a high school kid or even a college kid who's on a 7-day rotation, and ultimately you want him to pitch on a 5-day rotation in the big leagues. What kind of approach do you prefer for a guy like that? Because there's obviously been talk about piggybacking on the 5-day. Some guys go to a 6-day, some guys go to a 7-day with a longer pen in the middle or 2 pens as a way to bolster it. What's been your strategy for finding a way to gradually integrate guys? Because we've obviously seen the place where it doesn't work, like Japanese pitchers probably being a great example. A lot of them throw on a 7, sometimes 8, 9-day rotation. Then they come over here and they go to the 5, and an elbow goes in a matter of a couple of years because the workload is so much higher in that condensed way. What do you think the best way to attack that buildup is?
Well, I think again, it comes down to the individual. Where'd he come from? I mean, the guy, I can give you, so many examples, but you get the high school kid, then you maybe your first year, you let him pitch in, well, I guess there's no rookie ball anymore, but low A, and you monitor a little bit, see how he comes into spring training, how much weight he put on, what he did, and then you put him on, the rotation, and what I think my personal experience is we had some really good success in Atlanta with developing 5 homegrown pitchers at one time. That was probably 5 or 6 years ago, but they all threw in the minor leagues, and they threw a number of innings. And the other thing about the innings, Eric, is that, I've seen guys going 4 1/3 innings, and because they have a 75 pitch count, man on second base, 2 outs, really tight game, take the guy out of the game. We always used to encourage guys, that's how they learn to get through trouble. Let's you don't have to leave them every time. There's common sense to when to go get them, when not to. But I think to answer your question, minor league training is difficult. Spring training is difficult because there's not enough innings. So what's worked is the month of April. Yes, we will limit innings. 5 innings, 75, 78, 81, 70, whatever the amount of pitches is. And then now once April comes, here you go. You can go 90, 95, and you always preach efficiency. Let's throw 15 pitches an inning, 70. 7 innings is 105 pitches. We ought to be able to do that. And then we navigate our way. Every incremental change should be repeated. So we make sure we go on. So we don't go from. I see guys go, well, they're throwing 30 today, 45, 65, 90. Let's do it incrementally and repeat each level, and then gradually. And I've had several prominent baseball people comment to us, what we did was we backed off guys at the end of the year and we let them go at the beginning of the year. Maybe it makes more sense to let's start easy and let them finish where they're building up and hey man, I threw 110 innings in the Carolina League this year. Next year I threw 140 innings in the Southern League, So I think depends on the individual, but and there's no one way to do it. You have to
Mhm.
monitor it every day. But very basically, I think we can increase the innings.
Yeah.
I think Dom's doing it this year. We're not taking anybody out after May 1st,
Mhm.
with X amount of pitches. We're letting them get through some tough times, navigate his way, maybe back off the next time if you have to. So there's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you go 7 innings today and it's 115 pitches. It was real tough. Okay, well, maybe next start in the minor leagues, we're going to keep you at 90, 95, give you a little break, all-star break. There's so many ways to,
Yeah. Buy the extra day, something like that.
yeah, integrate recovery
Yeah.
and get guys the right way.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've looked at, particularly early in the season when we know the injuries are higher, is I think we lose sight of the fact that, pitch count is only one stressor, right? I think, you talk to anybody who's ever played baseball at a high level, like multiple ups. Like if you're a guy that goes from 40 to 50 pitches, it doesn't seem like a crazy jump, but if that's 2 to 4 ups, that's a really big difference. Like going and sitting down, all that. And then also we often have a time in spring training where two other variables. One, they might go from a 6 day to a 5 day, so that the rest will shorten. And then a lot of times those guys, they have a velo bump, right? Something mechanically clicks, or maybe it goes from bullpens to throwing live BPs or actual game outings. So before you realize that the pitch count, the number of ups, the intensity, all that stuff can jump at the same time. So I think to your point, you have to really like be able to pivot day to day based on how
Right.
things went and how they're feeling, whether they're sick, whether they slept enough, all those different factors.
And and you see it in your eye. I know you see it because I've seen you in action. But guys don't want to be, for lack of a better term, highly recommended to do something.
Mhm.
Well, this is the way I do it. I
Yeah.
think one of the worst things that happens in the game today is I go nuts in the meeting if I hear the phrase, "Well, this is the way we've always
Yeah.
done it." Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
If anyone has a better suggestion, please bring it to us
Mhm.
because again, we can get better.
Yeah.
We can get better. The reason I'm curious and keep going on and on with this stuff is, as I mentioned to you, I believe I did. I just feel so bad for the young relief pitchers today
Mhm.
who come up and, I mean, their first 3 years, they're physically beat up. The chances,
Mhm.
I mean, so many of them. Johnny Venters, there's tons and tons that unfortunately careers are cut short because of one reason or another. But, there's got to be some way we can help out. That's
Yeah,
we're
I mean
trying.
the high velocity reliever it's an era we haven't seen prior to 10 years ago, but it's incredible. I mean, I saw a guy game last year, starter got removed in like a pinch with an injury, and dude comes up, does a couple arm circles, and first pitch is 97. He's literally the mop up duty guy, last arm in the bullpen. It was very eye opening to be like, my gosh, the last guy in this bullpen is 97, like with no warm up. It's a
Wow.
scary time in baseball, but it's kind of the
Yeah.
norm, unfortunately. Um, hey, we always begin to wrap up with a lightning round, and I'm actually really curious to hear your answers on these
Uh-oh.
first couple questions. What's one book that you think every player should read?
Probably the mental game of baseball.
That's a
I
good one.
mean, that's
Yeah.
the more I'm around the mental skills guys, and I know everybody kind of used to roll their eyes, but you know, um, it's you can talk to the good ones, the Smoltzes of the world, and those guys, and especially as a pitcher, I think Eric, because that mental game, the wind, the errors, the umpire's calls, things are out of your control, you know, and yet you have to stand out there
Yeah.
and you hear everybody, hey, stay calm, be cool, everything's all right. Yeah, okay, you come out here. So I think the mental game is something that really would help 99% of the pitchers involved in the game today.
Yeah, and the other 1% is probably lying.
Yeah.
What about a book that every coach should read from that
I,
perspective?
I think, I'm just a mechanics guy, and I
Yeah,
think the pitching biomechanics,
yeah,
it was an eye opener for me.
yeah.
A lot of it was said in language that took me a while to understand, but I understand the principle. And it really validated some of the stuff that I had learned over the years,
Mhm.
knowing, you know, and a different way to explain the right things and what's going on. But if you really dig into that, and the other one is whatever book comes out, if you have one on the ways to train and the exercises and the flexibility
Yeah.
for pitchers in their hips and their legs, because that's where everything
Yeah.
happens. It's ankles, it's knees, it's hips,
Yeah.
it's, you talk about hip shoulder separation, but some guys, their hips don't
Yeah.
work. So what do? Do you create a different angle on the
Yeah.
rubber? There's
Yeah.
so I think if you really become familiar and
Good
you
call.
learn your delivery,
Mm-hmm.
and there's ways to do that, then what you do is you minimize the amount of time you have to get back on track to make quality pitches.
Mm-hmm.
So if we understand our delivery and how to go about it and learn the real biomechanics that work for us,
Mm-hmm.
work for the long, lean guy and the short,
Yeah.
stocky guy, you know, people told me 100 times, hey, Nomo's not going to last because of his
Yeah.
turn. Well, if you really watch it, his turn, and it took us a while, he gets into a real good position. He does
Mm-hmm.
it a different way,
Yep.
but we can't cookie cut everybody.
Yeah.
But there are some basics I think guys should understand.
It's repeatable. And that was the Bob Keys book was Pitching
Yeah.
Biomechanics. Really good read. And this is actually another question, not to toot my own horn, but if you could encourage young pitchers to watch any pitcher, or pitchers in today's games, who would they be and why? Who do you like to watch? And if you're watching a game with your grandsons and you want them to pick something up, who are the guys that you're encouraging them to check out?
I like to watch the Charlie Mortons,
Yep.
the Maxes, the Verlanders, the guys that, and not because they're good, because they actually pitch and they embrace all the things. And I think some of the young guys, I would say Kevin Gosman, who's really become really good after a rough 2 or 3 years to start. There's just some young guys today that are, Garrett Cole, as you know, I mean, he was good and became better when he incorporated. There's another veteran guy who struggled a little bit in Pittsburgh, but found his way,
Yep.
went through Houston and got better when he got to New York. I mean, so there's a reason those guys last as long as they do.
Constantly refining along the way, figuring out ways to continue to compete.
Yeah. So that's what I encourage, because the guys with longevity and have a long career, I think, from a relieving standpoint, Mariano, my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, he was one pitch dominant, but his routine before a game was just unmatched. And he worked on it. He had the right kind of long toss for him, the right kind of, little, cut fastball, whatever you want to call it, that he threw and got in on guys and mastered his delivery. If you, there's a guy that, you don't hear much about, but if I have a digital printout of his mechanics from start to finish, and it's pretty incredible. That's consistency. So, those kind of guys, and not because they're big names, but because they're relevant to young kids today. And they had longevity and health and success and had some failures along the way. So
those are awesome recommendations. Can't go wrong with any of those guys. What about if you were going to go back in time and give a young Dave Wallace, call it 30 or 40 years ago, some advice, as you're dipping your feet into the shallow end of coaching and not knowing that you're going to have this long career in front office and, both major and minor league coaching, what would your advice to a young coach, Wallace be?
You know what? Listen more. I mean, unfortunately, I probably spoke up sometimes when I shouldn't have, out of emotion, and most decisions emotionally aren't really good ones. I didn't take enough time to really think things through and give people involved the right amount of credit, I guess, or the room to explain their particular opinion. But I've made so many mistakes in that area, is just being too emotional, not during the game as much as, during meetings, pre-meetings, post-meetings, winter meetings, those kind of things. And just, because as you well know, you have two ears and two eyes and one mouth for a reason. So I'm guilty,
I love
guilty,
that.
and I really should have probably been a little bit more inquisitive and not as emotional and
Yeah.
listen more.
It's a good look back perspective that I think a lot of us can, and I'm guilty of that myself as well. Um, maybe in the same vein of humility, we have a lot of kids and parents who listen to this podcast together, whether it's on the way to a game or way home from a tournament or something like that, way to school. If you could give one bit of advice to the kid, the parent, or both, what would your advice be in the context of this,
I
long-term
think just
baseball
let the
development?
young kids have some fun,
Yeah.
um, create the right type of coaching environment for
Mhm.
them. I mean, there's ways to approach young kids. Let them play, let them have fun, make sure they enjoy their lives as young kids. Parents, a friend of mine up here is an umpire, and he wrote a book about the quitting umpiring because of the parents. I mean, it's a game, it really
Yeah.
is, and you and I are fortunate to be in a game of baseball, in conditioning and all that, but it really is a game, and it's
Yeah.
entertainment, and it's fun, and if you have the talent,
Mhm.
unlike, and you keep bringing up
Yeah.
the 80s and 90s, unlike those years,
Yeah.
the coverage now and the baseball available to play, even beyond pro, independent league, college leagues, there's so much baseball to be played
Yeah.
that if your son is going to be good enough, he'll be good enough.
Yeah.
And I would say to parents, realize realize that even if your child plays in high school, I think it's 8% of high school athletes play in college, whether it's D1, D2, or D3.
Yeah.
8%. And that's not pro.
Yeah.
That's going to college.
You got to embrace
And
it's a conduit to something else.
right,
It's
right. So, I mean, make it, it's teamwork, it's learning to handle failure, getting along with you, listening to the coach and doing what's right. And there's so many good benefits of being involved in sports as a young child if it's done in the right way. So I guess that's what I would say to probably parents more than kids.
That's a great feedback and an amazing point to end on. Well, we are absolutely blessed to have your
Yeah,
expertise and your
save
personality and
it.
your stories and your sense of humor around the facility. So certainly spoiled, and we always love having you around. And so I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, and definitely appreciate you carving out some time.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Eric.
Our
See you
pleasure,
in a couple of weeks.
for sure.